welcome everyone again to our next iteration of the Military Medical Communities. We've got a great night. We've got an ENT from the Air Force, Emily Montgomery, and then Dr. Eva Chou from Ophthalmology in San Diego, is representing the Navy. And then Dr. Moores is here local in the DC area, and has been I don't know that there's a job in the Army he hasn't done at this point. So I'm excited to hear some of his leadership opportunities. Again, nothing that comes out of our mouths tonight represents USU, the Defense Health Agency, or the government. These are just some opinions from some docs trying to help you guys get to the next phase of life. If you like what you hear, the War Docs have some great podcasts that you can check out. If you want to learn more about some of the individual residencies, either through the AOA website or through the MMC site, you can link to PowerPoints for every residency in military medicine, and it tells you, who you can contact to schedule your rotation, to how many years you're there, and what kinds of rotations you're doing. And then definitely we're appreciative of our Army, Navy, Air Force, HPSP counterparts. I think one of the most valuable things about having this, the MMC, is the ability for you guys to link up with, Colonel Bethany Michaels and talk about Air Force HPSP with a physician recruiter. Captain O'Sullivan's not with us tonight, but we've got Lieutenant Commander Crotty and Orlando Cabrera, family med doc, who's going to be there to answer your questions. And then Mary Alice, Dr. Knoll is, always in. We were talking earlier, a lot of you have heard that we have some, we're opening up, these military medical community chapters across the nation. So here we get to meet online. You guys get to hear on a national level. But we had a great event this past Friday night where we pulled together the Howard, GW, HPSP residents and mixed them with, Howard and GW, HPSP students, and mixed in with a bunch of docs from Walter Reed and other docs around the NCR, and shared a pint and some story. If you would like to pull an event off like that in your area where you can meet up with other military medicine, wherever you are in your pathway, let us know and we can definitely help support. On the website, from the MMC website, you can kind of download and bylaws and or create an event. We'd love to help you find a mentor in your area. And with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Montgomery. So thank you so much for sharing your time with us tonight.
Yes, of course. Thanks. Hi, everybody. I'm Emily. I am a third-year resident at Walter Reed in ENT. Obviously, I have an Easter bunny because ENT is also, otolaryngology, of course, is like our real name, but people call us ENT, so ear, nose, and throat. So we've got bunny ears, an elephant nose, and a giraffe. If you've ever seen an endotracheal tube for a giraffe on like those zoo, social media pages, I feel like that's kind of cool. So anyway, ear, nose, and throat. Let's talk about it. So how did I get here? So my path, I am from New Orleans. So the first picture you see is me many years ago. I was queen of a Mardi Gras parade, which is, I feel like, part of my New Orleans heritage, which seems kind of like a far cry to go from being a Mardi Gras queen to joining the military. But that's me. I like keeping things interesting. So on the bottom left, you can see me and my best friend in high school making faces at our chemistry textbooks after our final exam, which is interesting because I ended up majoring in chemistry in college. But I went to an all-girls school for a long time, and after graduating high school, went to the Air Force Academy, which you then see in the middle bottom picture. That's a picture I took when the cadets were marching. So it can be really beautiful in Colorado, which is something really interesting, and one of the things that drew me to the academy in the first place, because it was so beautiful, and Colorado was such a different kind of location in terms of weather and things to do compared to Louisiana. I wanted to do something different. If you look in the top middle, there's like an old timey picture of some people. So the gentleman in the middle on the bottom who's seated is my great-great-grandfather, who was the West Point class of 1887. So I come from 5 generations of West Point in my family. He was the first. And you can, if you look close, you can see he's got like a cavalry insignia on his collar there. And then next to him, to the right side of the picture, is my great grandfather, who is the class of 1915 at West Point. So that's kind of neat. I feel like that was like such a long time ago. And it's just so interesting that, we have this heritage in my family. I have a cousin who graduated in 2014. So that was the youngest West Point generation. But I went to the Air Force Academy, not West Point, because mainly I think because I had an older cousin who graduated in the class of 2002, I believe. So he was there when 9/11 happened, which is interesting because he, signed up to go to the academy at, a time where like it was a very different tempo, and then things changed. And in today's climate, things change rapidly. So you never know. The picture in the top right corner is me with my classmates in my squadron at the academy. And the main reason I chose that picture is just because you make some of the best friends of your life when you're in some of these crazy situations that the military puts you in. And I feel like USIS is kind of similar. And so I'll get to that in another slide. But it was very hard to choose all the different pictures to kind of assemble into this whole backstory. So I went to the academy, I majored in chemistry, and I graduated in 2009. I had thought about maybe going to school to be like an NP or a PA at that point, but my grades weren't really great. And I think it was just, part of my path to go do something else for a few years. So I went into acquisitions in the Air Force. My first base was Eglin, which is where the picture in the top right corner is. It really is that pretty. It was a really great first assignment. I had a great time there. There's a lot to do. And of course, the beach is fantastic. The picture in the middle, you see like a really pretty sunset. That's like a picture I took on my iPhone back in like 2009. So I can only imagine what kind of quality image you would get today taking that same sort of photo. But it's a beautiful place to be. And it was a great place for me to learn about how acquisitions in the military worked and how units worked, where we would, talk to the flyers about what they needed for something and try to, figure out how we can make that happen on like the acquisition side. After about 2 years of that, I thought about getting my master's. The Air Force very much values education, especially in the promotion system. And every couple of years, they'll mask and unmask if you have an advanced degree as a line officer, which I was at the time. And so I was like, well, like I could go back to school for chemistry. So the top left corner, you can see me in the chemistry lab at Florida State, which is where I got my first master's, and the Air Force paid for it. So it was very cool to have a different experience. I think when you go to the academy and you're in a military school, you're like, well, what's it like to go to real college? And I feel like I kind of got an idea of what that was like when I got my master's at Florida State. It was a lot of fun, but I feel like the camaraderie isn't quite the same on the civilian side. So, but I'm glad I kind of learned that and realized that, because it helped kind of inform my decision making when it came to choosing what med school to go to many years down the road. So the degree I got when I got my master's at Florida State was sponsored by the Air Force with the plan for me to go teach at the academy with my master's degree afterwards. So in the bottom left corner, you see me with one of my classes of chemistry I taught. This was actually the very last session of the very last class that I ever taught before I finished my time at the academy. It was really fulfilling. I very much enjoyed teaching, especially as someone who wasn't like a 4.0 student my entire, time at the academy. I felt like it was like my civic duty to like help teach people who weren't like naturally super gifted students. And I think I connected with some of those people. The picture in the middle bottom, you see just people like marching, which is like part of, just military stuff that you do at the academy or, other places in the military, other military schools, or even, if you do ROTC or HPSP. And do things with like your military group. But I don't know, I feel like kind of an image that captured just kind of what that looked like. If you've been on one of these like marches or hikes or whatever, you know exactly what like the dust smells and tastes like in this picture. So moving on. So I did my time at the academy teaching to pay back my degree. I had a great time. I actually did extra years even after my payback because I enjoyed teaching so much. But I felt like somehow more school was going to be in my future. And it was either going to be a PhD in chemistry to come back and pursue like permanent professorship potentially at the academy down the road. Or, I always kind of wondered, like, what if, medicine was something for me? It was still kind of in the back of my mind. And I really looked into like what pursuing that would look like. And so I actually, this is a picture in the top left corner of my last winter in Colorado. And I was like, it's really cold here. I think it's time for me to go somewhere warmer and do something else. Um, and so I actually left Colorado, moved back home to New Orleans. So that's my top middle picture there. And went to Tulane to get my master's in like pre-med stuff to kind of get some of the prerequisites to apply to medical school, to take some anatomy classes, and just kind of like decompress and figure out like what's next, going into medicine. What do I want to do with my life, basically? And so that was a whirlwind. It was a very short program. It was like 9 months. Anybody who's in this group chat who's done one of those like post-bac programs knows that they're really quick and they pack a lot into that time to prepare you to apply to, whether you go to dental school, medical school, or, NP, PA, things like that. So I had a great time. That's me with my parents on graduation day. I just had a picture in the bottom left corner that's like another Colorado picture. But anyway, Tulane went in and out really quick. And during this time, I was actually a reservist in the DC area. I always kind of wanted to see what it was like to live in our nation's capital. I figured a lot of interesting decisions happened here, a lot of political power, money. I figured it was like an interesting place with lots of cool museums, monuments, things like that to check out. So I was a reservist here in the DC area. And the plan was kind of to apply to medical school while I was a full-time reservist. So I moved from New Orleans to DC for what was supposed to be a year to apply to medical school. And kind of do my interviews and everything and see where I landed. But I always kind of thought I would go back to New Orleans. But interestingly enough, in the top left corner, you can see my husband with me. So I'm Air Force still, and my husband is Navy. And I met him. And so I decided to, stay here and go to USIS and join the military. For those of you who are in the military, you know that, we have joint spouse, and I figured that would definitely be part of my equation for residency. Whereas like if I went to a civilian school and applied to the civilian match, joint spouse wouldn't be like a thing. I don't think civilian places would really care necessarily. Maybe they would a little bit, but not like they do in the military. I feel like they kind of help take, the whole person and your family into consideration, because your family serves to a degree. So I went to USIS. I got into 5 medical schools when I chose USIS, and it was great. I would choose it again. I had a great time. I made again, kind of like at the academy, some of the best friends of my life. So in the bottom left corner, you can see my group. Our 4th year after we finished Bushmaster, everybody's very sweaty. And again, if you've been there, you kind of know what this picture smells like and what the dust in the air tastes like. The bottom middle 2 pictures, you can see me with some of my best friends from medical school. On the left is Teresa. She's a psychiatry resident at BAMC. And then to the right is Christina, who's a family medicine resident at Nellis. And so, they went into different specialties, but some of my best friends for sure from USIS. And in the top right corner, you see a group of us. These are all the people who have graduated from USAFA, who graduated in my class from USIS. And we all went into different specialties, which was really cool. In the top middle is just like, I dumped out my bag and there was a bunch of stuff and I took a picture, and that was just like my metaphor for like doing med school during COVID, which I'm happy for all of you guys that are in med school right now that you don't have to deal with that, because what a time that was. So, match day, that's a picture of me and my family in the top left corner. So, I opened my email because I was on an away rotation. I wasn't at USIS, opening an envelope, and I found out I matched into ENT at my number 1 choice, which was Walter Reed. All through med school, I knew I wanted to do ENT and that I wanted to be at Walter Reed for residency, because I love this program. I love the people. I love the attendings. I knew this is what I wanted to do, and very lucky for me that my hard work paid off and I matched exactly where I wanted to in the specialty that I wanted. So in the bottom left corner, you see me with my co-residents in my year. So at Walter Reed ENT, we have 1 person in each branch. So Navy, Army, and Air Force represented in each class, which I think is awesome. So anyways, that brings me to the rest of the pictures. But basically, like, why did I choose ENT? So I figured out very early on in medical school that I wanted to go into ENT. And it's a very specific specialty to choose very early. But I think timing is part of that. So my son had his tonsils out the first week of medical school, like right before it started when we're still in like our orientation phase. At the time, I had been thinking maybe gen surge or emergency medicine and doing something more operational. But when he got his tonsils out, I met the attending and the resident because they came and they told us like how the surgery went. And they just seemed like cool surgeons. They seemed happy. They didn't seem stressed or grumpy or anything like that. They seemed very cool. So I was like, maybe ENT is a thing. So I, Googled it on my phone while my son was like in recovery. And it actually seemed kind of neat. And I really thought some of the, yeah, almost as happy as a derm. Thanks, Dr. Cox. Yeah. Um, but it seemed like a cool specialty operating in interesting areas of the head and neck. I had taken a head and neck anatomy class specifically at Tulane just because I liked anatomy and really enjoyed it. And so I feel like I kind of was able to read about the types of surgeries that we do in ENT. And I was like, that could be kind of neat. Like, I want to look more into this. So I started shadowing in winter break of my first year and never really found anything else that made me anywhere near as happy. And you really need to choose a specialty that makes you happy so that when you're at the hospital, working long hours, you're exhausted, physically, mentally, all the above. You're doing what you want to be doing and what interests you because the days are too long. Otherwise, you can't just choose something because it sounds cool or because someone told you you should do it. You should really choose what makes you happy because otherwise you're going to have like a long, hard road. So I chose ENT in part because of the anatomy, in part because of the procedures, but also because of the people. Everyone is pleasant to work with. I think we're all interested. I think we're kind of nerds. So we're kind of interested in like teeny tiny anatomy and teeny tiny places. In the top right corner, you can see, yeah, so that's a cadaver lab. Don't worry. So that's Greg Hill, a previous chief of ours who graduated a few years ago, walking one of the residents through one of our cadaver labs doing sinus surgery. So yeah, the anatomy might look a little bit different and a little bit gross. But yeah, I'm in the top middle picture. You can see me operating with one of our current chiefs and our previous program director. Both of them, I feel like I've known them for such a long time, not just during residency, have been really helpful in mentoring me and guiding me in all the ups and downs of, the journey into ENT. So anyway, let's see. Next slide. So residency. So you finally match, you make it to residency. What's it like? Lots of looking at microscopes, as you can see from some of the pictures that I have here to look at ears. We have a temporal bone lab, which is what everybody in the matching scrub caps in the top middle is working on. We actually have that this week, so we do it twice a year. So it helps practice our skills to do things with, cadaver specimens so that we are well trained and, you're not doing it for the first time on a person, for example. In residency, we do lots of academic endeavors. We have academic conferences, we have dissection courses, and we also pursue different, research efforts. I really enjoy research, so I have a truckload of research projects. Anybody on this conference call that knows me knows that I have too many projects going on. So, but the fun thing about having lots of projects is you learn a lot and you also get to go to conferences. So in the top left corner, you can see me with one of my co-residents at one of our research conferences that we go to. And it's just a really good time because you learn a lot. Sometimes you get ideas and get inspired. Sometimes you learn new surgical techniques or things to think about. And sometimes you see like attendings have like great debates on, topics that are, very polarizing. And so I feel like that's really interesting and fun to do. So if you're interested in ENT or want to learn more, please consider rotating with us. This slide, the font is probably teeny tiny, but basically we have great case numbers. Some people are concerned, okay, if I go to a military program instead of a civilian one, will I still have the same key indicator case numbers as I would if I went to a civilian program? And the answer is absolutely. We have really great case numbers. You get a great depth and variety of all the different cases that you're required to, and also all the ones beyond that. If you like research, if you want to match into fellowship, we absolutely have lots of our graduates that go into those pathways, but we also train a ton of general ENTs that go into the Air Force, Navy, and Army and serve just in a general capacity as opposed to being like specialized in facial plastics or neurotology or sinus surgery. But we have a great program. We have a great group. We do lots of fun activities. In the top middle, you can see us at the zoo. We run to the zoo once a year. We're about to do it in a couple weeks. We literally run from Walter Reed to the zoo. It's kind of wild. But we have a great group. Everybody's very close. We have a ton of fun. Sometimes it's kind of like you have to like pinch me that like this is my job, that I get to have this much fun and make such a difference in patients' lives. The senses, hearing, speech, taste, all that stuff. It's how we interact as humans with the world and with each other. And to get to do surgery to help impact someone's quality of life in those areas is truly like the greatest gift. That's me. That's ENT.
Thank you so much, Dr. Montgomery. I really appreciate it. That was it's always fun to see how different people's careers and pathways take them from the Air Force Academy to flying to doing other things. But thank you so much. Awesome. And now let's move on to ophthalmology. Take it away, my friend.
All right. Hi, everybody. This is Eva Chou. I'm calling in from San Diego. Thanks to Dr. Cox for putting together. And hi, Emily. It's great to see you again. Dr. Cox asked me to put this together, and I said, how do you condense 30 plus years into 5 minutes? So I'm going to try here. Okay. So I'm raised in California, but I am a first generation American, immigrated here when I was 3 from Taiwan via Canada. I went to Cal Berkeley for undergraduate and had a double major in immunology and music because I just couldn't decide. So, hey, why not study both? Loved it both and actually had a tough time deciding whether or not I wanted to do musicology PhD or actually pursue medicine. Medicine had always been a love of mine ever since I was a child. I'm a 4th generation physician in my family. All right. So since I couldn't decide, I decided to actually hit up Boston for about a year. Well, a year actually turned into 13, and this is why. I worked at a lab at Joslin Diabetes Center at that time. I was doing microvascular research, made a few transgenic mice, really loved it, and then decided to go on and do a master's in medical sciences at Boston University. Probably the toughest year and a half of my life. Did a thesis there, also in diabetes research, and then realized that, hey, there's a lot of different fields involved with diabetes, amongst them ophthalmology. So that was really just the first spark of how I got interested in ophthalmology. And then after grad school, I couldn't find a job. So when I worked at Starbucks, I found this next job in Dana-Farber Cancer Institute, where I worked on SIV research, and then applied for school and got into, there at Boston University. Now, this is very expensive school, and I did not want my parents who had spent their lifetime working to have to pay for me. So I found an alternate way of paying for school, and that was through HPSB. The Navy HPSB was the one that gave me the most interest. And so I said, okay, let's do this. And that was the beginning of my Navy career, and I signed the papers back in 2001. Then went to med school, where I first went to Officer Indoctrination School, which they now call ODS, and Newport. What a great way to start out a career. And so you start out with a class of about 40 people from all walks, mostly in the medical field, plus your nuclear, some engineers, and then some dentists as well. And then you graduate at the end of 6 weeks to become an officer. It's a process, and it's something that's life-changing. And then you kind of forget it all, and you go back to medical school. And then you say, okay, well, I'm supposed to be doing some rotations during the summer. What in the world do I do? So every year as a HPSB student, you do 4 weeks of some sort of active duty rotation. So that could be your officer development school. That could be your board preparation school. That could be rotations at different hospitals, especially in the fields and the areas where you want to apply to. So during that time, you'll get paid as an active duty service member and also get a stipend. A word to the wise, keep all your paperwork for this, because in the back end, it will matter for retirement. Okay. If you have any more questions about that, let me ask me. I'm forgetting there. So when it came time to apply for residency, I thought, well, you know what? I thought about endocrinology, of course. I thought about ophthalmology. I also thought about OBGYN because, I didn't want to like OB, but for some reason when I was rotating, it really grabbed me as well. And I I don't think that's a coincidence because I would have been a fourth generation OBGYN, but thankfully uh, I came to my senses and decided ophthalmology was a better path for me. So, in terms of how this happens, the joint GME selection board opens in late summer. Most of us will do our audition rotations in the summer or fall, and also do our interviews during that time. Our rank list goes out in mid-October, and the results come in mid-December. How that coincides with the NMRP match is that I think for the NMRP match, it's more of a January-March type of thing. But for those of us who have fields that are in SF match, which is, it used to be ophthalmology and ENT. I don't think ENT does this anymore, but there's a third match that we have to go through for our specialty. So that year I did 3 different matches. The first was for GMESB, the second for SF match, and then the third one was NMRP for internship. And thankfully, I got my first choice for all of those, which was a full deferment from the Navy to train as an ophthalmologist at a civilian hospital. And secondly, matched into Boston University, which was my first choice for ophthalmology. And then the third one was my internship year, because it wasn't categorical back then. I did at a community hospital in Cambridge, Mass, at Mount Auburn Hospital. Oof. All right. And then when we graduated from medical school, our cohort from New England, we were all promoted on the USS Constitution. So that was a really, really good day. All right. Now, residency. Ophthalmology is great. It's a lot of running around. And this is how I felt for most of my time. But why did I choose it? You get to see kids, you get to see adults, you get to see sick people, you get to see well people, you develop long-term relationships with them. And then a lot of times you get to really become almost, you develop good relationships with the patients because you see them in the long term. I love this because it allows you to do as little or as much as you want to. And the great thing about ophthalmology is you can look inside somebody's dilated pupil and look at the retina and say, oh, you have diabetes, you have hypertension, you've got some kidney disease, you might have leukemia, and all those things are diagnosable just by a beautiful eye exam. You want to learn how? Come rotate with us. Okay. So after 4 years, or increased ICP, that's right. When do I ask my colleagues to please consider a shunt? I won't say put in the shunt, but please consider a shunt. So I went into active duty 8 years after joining the Navy. So my first gig was at the National Naval Medical Center, where I was a comprehensive ophthalmologist. This was a casualty receiving hospital at the time for a lot of our Marines coming back from Afghanistan. And I was the director of the medical student education for all HPSB students rotating through ophthalmology as well as through USIS. And then I was also a member of the Pharmacy and Therapeutics Committee. So one thing, I walked into a room as lieutenant 03, full of senior captains 06s, and I was like, I don't know what I'm doing here. I don't know why you put me here, specialty leader, because I don't really feel like I belong here. Here I am. I'm about maybe 15 years younger than everybody else. I don't know what Navy is. And so this is what my mentor said to me at the time. He said, bloom where you're planted. And so I took that. And so within 6 months of coming onto active duty, I took my boards. A week after my boards, I deployed to continue Promise 2011. So this is on USNS Mercy. We went to 9 countries over 5 months, did hundreds of surgeries. And I did. I went ahead and got my Swindo pin, and then I also became a shellback, which is why I have a squid on my head over there. And these are all Navy traditions that really make the experience what it is. Operated on kids as young as 1 year old to, we had a 105-year-old patient that we did cataract surgery for. And those things are life-changing to me. And these are the experiences that you remember. And so here you go. Like being an ophthalmologist is great because you can do 8 surgeries in the time that it takes your general surgeons to do 1, or your ENT surgeons, or your gynecologists to do 2. And so these are short surgeries or life-changing surgeries. And here in this little dish, these are lenses the cataract lenses that we took out from just one country in the Caribbean. And we replaced those with clear plastic lenses to help them to see. Yes, absolutely true, Dr. Morse. And so when I came back, the hospital had changed. It became Walter Reed National Military Medical Center. I was kicked out of my office and put into another office with the only other female ophthalmologist in the area. And I was like, what's going on? And I was a little bit livid about that. And that's when I decided, hey, there's really not enough representation of women in ophthalmology in the military at the time, number one. Number two, definitely not enough representation of minorities either. So I kind of kept that in my mind to say, okay, I'm going to look out for those people who are a little bit too timid to ask, what is this field all about? And I want everybody to have equal chances of being an ophthalmologist. So I became very involved with the residency program and also went to warrior care. One of the patients that I saw here as a comprehensive ophthalmologist was Corporal Kyle Carpenter, who had been gravely injured. He had thrown himself on a bomb, saving his buddy, and later received the gosh, I'm blanking on this, but the highest award awarded to a service member. And he came back and he said, I'm so sorry. I was so nasty to you when I first came in. I was just so hurt. And I said, thank you for what you do for everybody here. And he changed my career because I realized that a comprehensive ophthalmologist, I could not do everything that I really wanted to do. So as the specialties came forward, I'm like, well, I think I want to go to fellowship. So I applied for Oculo-Plastic's fellowship. And this is a subspecialty of ophthalmology having to do with reconstructive and plastic surgery of the eye and the orbit. And yeah, lots of Mo's. So I went to a program in Austin called Texas Oculo-Plastic Consultants. Spent 2 years, 24/7 being on call as the sole fellow in a city without any residents or medical students or other fellows. So that was a really, really great experience, but boy, was it hard. And I tried to learn everything that I could in those 2 years because I knew that I'd be coming back to teach. And so, sorry for the graphic pictures. I should have done trigger warning. So some of the things that I really wanted to focus on the things that I could do with trauma. So I covered 4 level 1 trauma hospitals, covered a pediatric trauma hospital as well. And these are the things that I brought back. The pictures at the right, that is my ultimate mentor, Dr. John Shore, retired colonel in the Air Force. He was a fighter pilot in Vietnam, decided afterwards to come back and go to medical school, was down at BAMC as the department head. And then after retiring, he was recruited to Harvard, decided that he didn't like the program there, and then came down and started the first Oculo-Plastics practice in Central Texas and covered probably a 500-mile radius of patients there. And everything I learned from, I think about what he would do. So, you always end up with a North Star, and mine is, what would John Shore do? So what a great guy. So after fellowship, I was kind of, I want to split my time here into 3 things. Clinically, I knew that I wanted to maintain clinical activity. I went into ophthalmology. I became a doctor to be a doctor. So whatever I did, it was with this lens that I need to still be clinically active. So I became a full-time Oculo-Plastic staff. I was really involved with resident education. I made really good friends with ENT, OMFS, neurosurgery, dermatology, and then also trained technicians and medics and corpsmen, and deployed again on the Mercy a few years later. And then I'm now over at San Diego at Naval Medical Center San Diego, again, full-time Oculo-Plastic staff. I've now become the associate program director for ophthalmology residency. And we, in partnership with the program director, we have revamped our sim courses and also a lot of other things that make ophthalmology fun. Come rotate with us. Okay. On the academic front, this is another area of growth. Really helped to revamp the ocular trauma surgery lab, which happens on an annual basis over at USIS. This is tri-service and also regional. And we do a week-long simulation-based course on ocular trauma tenets. And this has now been picked up by both the American Academy of Ophthalmology and American Society of Ophthalmic Trauma. They use the things that we have founded within this course to teach people nationwide. Another thing that I've done is the lateral condylotomy training. So this is pertinent to almost everybody who deploys. So orbital compartment syndrome is a condition where you can lose sight within 90 minutes. So we've been teaching our medics, our general surgeons, nurse practitioners, anybody who could be in the front line before we can get to them, how to recognize and treat orbital compartment syndrome. And this has now been integrated into the Asset Plus course for surgeons, as well as the some of the JTS stuff. And the other thing is, I am a lifelong learner. I love school and I love learning. So I got a chance to do the tropical medicine course. I went back to War College and I got my JPME Part 1. I also did the global health course, distance learning certificate. And then I'm finishing up a master's, or I'm in the middle of a master's of graduate, of health education over at USIS. So these are some of the other things that you can do as an active duty service member. And you don't really have to just do one thing. You can have it all. Just remember your priorities. So mine is always to be still clinical, but also to allow myself to have these experiences. And the last thing, but I think the most important, is leadership. Military pushes us into places that we may not be comfortable with. And really, it's up to us to meet that challenge. So I've done a few things. Amongst them are the Operative Services Committee within the National Capital Region, and bridging surgical operations across all the 4 hospitals there, standardizing their policies and looking at how it is to be somebody who creates policies that make sense and creates policies that actually help surgeons. So surgeons working for surgeons and not against surgeons. Secondly, I was the ECOMS chair, which is the de facto chief medical officer before there was one, at Walter Reed. And so as a principal advisor to the hospital staff there, looked at medical staff governance, looking at credentialing, and also risk management. What happens when your colleagues don't do good things? Those are things that I never thought I would be a part of, but it's been really eye-opening. By the way, this is Sully, and I did get to meet him. And then, so I want to end with this, is that I think my mentor meant well when he says, bloom where you're planted, but I think my new adage is, don't just bloom, build better soil, build soil that these other things can grow around you and you can impact the people and the places where you work. All right. Thank you so much.
Eva, that was amazing. Thank you so much. Let's transition to Dr. Moores. We got a little taste of leadership, and now we can hear even more. So
thanks, everybody. Appreciate the opportunity. Leon Moores. I'm a pediatric neurosurgeon by training, which means you do a neurosurgery residency and then a pediatric fellowship, not the other way around. So I am not a pediatrician. So I absolutely rely on my pediatric colleagues to take care of these kids from the whole body perspective when I take care of the brain, spinal cord, and peripheral nerves. When you do presentations in an academic environment, you typically have to put out a disclaimer. So my disclaimer is I am hugely biased about the military and hugely biased about the Army. My dad was in the Air Force. My brother and I both went into the Army. My brother married an Army officer, and they both are retired Army. My brother's a Ranger Hall of Fame, Silver Star, Mogadishu war hero. My wife I met at USU. We are both Army retirees, and all 4 of our kids went into the Army. 3 of them still are. So you can take everything I say with the largest grain of salt you can imagine. At one point, when we were at our older daughter's, Kristen's, change of command up at Fort Meade, my brother, his wife, Lisa, and I, and all of our kids were there in uniform, and we counted 126 years of active Army service with just Moore's name tapes at that ceremony. So again, a little bit biased. A couple things for my fellow presenters too. I was kind of laughing when Emily showed that lovely picture. Emily, I don't know if you're still on, but the Eglin Air Force, the fighter jets flying over the beach and this beautiful beach. And I harken back to my time in the Eglin area in winter ranger school in January of 1985. And when you're sloshing around in the swamps and the beach at Eglin at ranger school, it was not pleasant at all. So I almost had a little PTSD when I saw the Eglin beach. I was like, oh, geez, no. Oh, my gosh, I don't want to go back there. But it was beautiful. Maybe I should go in the summer. And then, Eva, just, I will tell you as a, also someone who's been taking care of complex craniofacial injuries for a long time in kids and adults. Big shout out. There's nothing quite like having a great Oculo-Plastics colleague to help you with that. And overall, the message there for all of you that are listening is it is a team sport. None of us can do this without our surgical colleagues, our medical colleagues, our nursing and administrative colleagues. We have a tendency to sort of stay in our foxhole and, sometimes think that, the other folks around the hospital are the enemy and the administrators are just trying to keep us down, and they're giving us these EMR requirements and trying to make sure we close out all our notes and trying to increase our productivity, when ultimately all of us in healthcare are really trying to take care of patients. And we all have different lenses on that. And one of the things that I've learned in, almost 40 years of medical practice and medical leadership is that really, really look at everybody's perspective and give them the credit that we're all trying to do the right thing for patients. We may have different ideas about what that means, but we are all on the same team. And then when you coalesce that into military healthcare, Army, Navy, Air Force, Coast Guard, Public Health Service, Space Force, well, I still have a hard time saying Space Force without laughing. Sorry. But we're all one big team. So that's a little public service announcement from a guy who's probably the oldest one on the call. I don't know. Am I the oldest one on the call? You don't have to answer that. That's okay. All right. So career highlights and lessons learned. So you guys can Google me. And I'm not like the Indiana coach. I don't say Google me, I win. I win a lot, fortunately for my patients, but we also have some terrible losses. And when we started touching base a little bit on cancer care, I go to a lot of funerals for kids that we couldn't save. And for all of you who are going into any specialty, know that that's part of the game. And it's hard. You're signing up for something hard. This is not banking. Apologies to the bankers who I'm sure have stressful jobs, but know that you're going into something that's hard, and you've got to want to do hard stuff. If you're going into medicine, patients aren't going to do well under your care. Sometimes you're going to have some great successes, but you're going to have some losses. You're going to have some misses, and you got to get through that. You got to get back in the saddle, and you got to get back taking care of patients, because the vast majority are going to do well because of what you do, because of the effort that you put in. But you got to want to do hard. This is not a lifestyle special, world profession. It's not this is all about me profession. This is all about the patient, and that's what it's going to be. So I ended up going to West Point, branched infantry after getting out of the Hudson High Reform School for Wayward Boys and Girls, and then went to USU after that, neurosurgery fellowship, and then have focused after my neurosurgery training and throughout have looked at leadership in healthcare, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Some of the things that I wish I knew earlier is that, careers are branching paths. So all of you may have ideas about what you want to do. Hopefully you all have open minds and you're looking at options. lot of branches, a lot of detours, things that I didn't anticipate. I'm going to go through a little bit of that, and hopefully that'll help you over time. So the first big detour was when Bob Gilligan, who was my guidance counselor in high school back in 1979, don't do the math on that. I would prefer that you don't, said, hey, Leon, you're captain of this and president of that. Why don't you think about West Point? And I was growing up in New England. I knew I wanted to go to medical school since I read The Making of a Surgeon by William Nolan in 5th grade. And I said, I want to be a doctor. I don't want to join the Army. And he's like, no, West Point, is a college. And I think you can go to medical school from there. And I thought, he threw a catalog at me and I looked at it and I said, and I had all my applications into the usual colleges and up and down the East Coast and Yale and Wesleyan and Harvard and Hopkins. And I was like, why would I join the Army? But curiosity, not a bad thing. Took a look, went and visited, absolutely fell in love with the visit and said, this is where I need to be. One of the things that certainly at that time was that a lot of the undergraduate programs were super cutthroat, super competitive. I talked to folks when I was I won't name the school, but would find their lab experiments sabotaged because someone else was trying to get a better grade than them. And at West Point, that was not a thing. And the military environment, if you were getting an A+ in organic chemistry and someone in your company at West Point was failing, you would take time and coach them. And maybe you end up with an A- or a B+ so that they can pass. And that was the environment. That was the type of team that I wanted to be on. So knowing that I could still go to medical school and getting that feel of being part of a bigger team, something that's more than you, others before self, was such a great fit for me psychologically that was immediately right. And I said, that's it. I'm going to West Point. I'm going to go to West Point, and ended up going there. And I joke sometimes that you go to West Point and it's kind of like joining a cult, right? They shave your head and you run up and down the street singing, I want to be an airborne ranger. And pretty soon you start thinking you actually do want to be an airborne ranger. So I got to senior year and I got accepted to all the schools I applied to, including my first choice, which was the Uniformed Services University. And I went and I visited USU and said, this is what I've wanted to do my whole life, but I would really like to do a tour as an infantry officer. I think if I'm going to take care of soldiers for a career, that I want to see what they go through. I want to live that life. I want to, get down in the dirt and the mud and really experience what it's like to be in the Army. And USU, to their credit, said, okay, go for it. As long as you don't, as long as you're medically fit, we're not going to make you retake the MCATs. You'll have to do an application, but, we like you. We think it's great. Do that. So I did I only half joke, my government sponsored Outward Bound program, and jumped out of airplanes and ended up at a lot of rifle ranges and blew up a bunch of stuff, and then came back to USU. So, the idea there for me, and the lesson that boils down to, is, and trust your instincts. You're going to make a lot of decisions. You're going to have a lot of doors that are open. You all work hard. You're dedicated. You're going to have options, and you're going to get to forks in the road and say, oh, wow, I could do A or B. And for me at that point, I thought, I really want to take a detour here. And, a lot of people do a gap year. I did a gap tour as an airborne ranger infantry officer. trust those instincts. If it feels like to you that this is where your passion and your purpose are, then go for it. So I'm going through medical school. My wife's a year ahead of me. She was a year younger, but I did this infantry detour thing. And she was going into internal medicine. I had decided I wanted to be a cardiologist and rotated through and did, fun stuff and thought, wow, cardiology is awesome. And a good friend of mine who was a year ahead of me at West Point, Jim Eklund, and our careers have followed each other for years and years and years. Went straight into medical school at USU, but he went to Ranger School in the summer before starting at USU and showed up 2 weeks late, got approval to do that. And I was all set. I was accepted to my internal medicine residency. I was going to be a cardiologist. And Jim walks up to me, and now he's a second-year resident in neurosurgery. And he walks in, and he's getting his butt kicked, right? He is like, his head is slumped down. He's got big dark circles under his eyes. His lab coat is stained and dirty. He's beaten up. He's malnourished, probably hypoglycemic. I don't know what his sodium was. He walks in, and I'm sitting in a Walter Reed dock station doing some notes. And I looked at him again, Jim, you look like, fill in the expletive, right? And he looks at me and he goes, at the time at USU, you could do either neurology or neurosurgery for your neuroscience elective. And of course, I was going to do neurology. I was going to be an internist. And remember, this is one ranger to another. And he looks at me and he goes, if you do neurology for your neuroscience elective and not neurosurgery, you can just take your ranger tab off and tear it and throw it in the trash because, you're worthless. And I was like, oh no, I've been challenged. All right, fine, whatever. I'll do neurosurgery. I'll show you I'm, as tough as you are, blah, 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 blah. So, December of my fourth year of medical school, I'm going to be an internist. I'm going to be a cardiologist. And I rotate through neurosurgery. And the first time I see the brain exposed, the dura opens, and I was like, uh-oh. Oh, wow. This is, oh my, I think I might need to be a neurosurgeon. So here's one of these detours, right? But the bottom line on this slide says verify before committing. So I finished medical school. I got approval from my program director and chief of medicine. They said, no, do your internship, take a year, make sure this isn't just infatuation. And if you still want to be a neurosurgeon at that point, of course, we'll release you to do so. So everyone is very understanding. So yes, trust your gut, but then also verify. And then that final step that I talked about in that prior one was when I went to West Point, and then I was an infantry officer. And from day one at West Point, throughout my time in the 82nd Airborne Division, leadership training was job one. And yes, you need to learn engineering. Yes, you need to learn chemistry. For me, you need to learn all of these other things academically, but really it's all about being a better leader. And this is the message for all of you. And I'm going to put in a shameless plug for my current mission, if you will, is that if you ask 100 doctors to name a physician leader, almost all of them are going to name a service chief, a department chair, a dean, a chief medical officer, someone like that who has a title. But if you look at a fundamental definition of leadership, which is influencing behavior to achieve a desired result, that is every doctor every day. If you're trying to get a patient to stop smoking, lose weight, take their medicines, you are leading. The degree to which you communicate well, the degree to which you are culturally competent, the degree to which you truly show that you care is going to influence their desire and ability to follow through with that plan. If you're doing a case in the OR, if you're leading a team on rounds, if you're doing a code in the ICU, if you're running a trauma in the trauma bay, you're the doc, you're leading. And I don't care if you're a brand new intern, they call them doctor's orders, not doctor's suggestions, for a reason. You are a leader in the healthcare environment. It's not just when you become a lieutenant colonel or a commander and now you have a title and now you're a director. You are leading from day one when you put on that long white coat. So when I got to USU, and it's changed since then, thankfully, but in most medical schools, there's no formal program to develop your ability to lead in a complex, highly stressful environment. And I'm trying to change that. There's a handful of other folks who are trying to change that, but I'm happy to communicate that, talk about that in the breakout session. If you want to hop into the neurosurgery session, if you're not, even if you don't want to be a neurosurgeon, if you want to talk about leadership and why that's important for every doctor every day, then this is where you can Google me. There's a ton of content on a website that you can look at. Leon Moore's All Physicians Lead. Every physician every day is a leader. I recognized a gap there and I'm trying to fill it. So through all of these things, trying to really show that ultimately it's better for patients. If doctors are better leaders, then the healthcare team performs better. There's very, very good empirical data that shows that employee team member engagement is improved, error rates are decreased, retention is improved, the environment of care is improved if the doctor is a better leader. So, my goal is to make sure that all doctors know that. You can self-teach, and hopefully your institutions will teach you fundamentals of leadership theory and practice. But if not, teach yourself. And a lot of that comes back to the military. I learned this starting at West Point. My parents, thankfully, taught me a lot about that. My coaches and, prior to high school taught me a lot about leadership. And then that was just honed in West Point and as an infantry officer. These things are critically important and they mirror the things that are important in medicine. Others before self, shared hardship. Those of us who lived through healthcare and COVID cannot help but be impacted by what it was like to be in an environment where you thought you were at risk. Potentially your family was at risk of what you were going to bring home to them. And yet you still came into work with your administrative teams, your nursing teams, your technical teams, and took care of those patients who needed you. So that trust that you built is an amazing thing. So looking back on this, I talked about all kinds of signals you'll get, and you'll get them too. Trust your gut, but verify. Ultimately, you're going to find your purpose. Careers are not linear. And all those detours, there's a great country song by Rascal Flatts that talks about all the things that I thought were bad led me to you. A love song, but it applies equally well in careers. As Eva said, grow where you're planted, but improve the place where you're planted so that you can maximally grow, maximally participate, and maximally take care of the people around you, not just your patients, your teammates, your colleagues. That's your real mission. So that's 7:30. I think that's the end of our time here, and I appreciate all of your attention.